Hey, do you have an idea for a podcast but don't know where to start? Or do you have an already existing podcast that you want to take to the next level? Well, check out WeKnowPodcasting.com. From concept development to theme music to editing to logos, WeKnowPodcasting.com is a one-stop shop for all things pod. Don't hesitate to hit us up. We're very nice.
Everybody, and welcome to the spooky Halloween episode of our movie night, where we talk about the scariest movies we can think of. This week, we're talking about The Addams Family from 1993. Scott, this is one that I feel like it's insane we haven't already gotten to on a Halloween. But
I feel like since we can only do one Halloween episode a year, the fact that we didn't do this in year one. Well, I mean, what did we even do in year one?
Space Invaders.
Oh, you punished me.
Well, I think, honestly, here's how I remember it. I think for a really long time we kept debating if this would count as a Christmas movie or a Halloween movie, because it starts at Christmas and ends at Halloween. but I think we ultimately were like, it's The Addams Family, let's just do it as a Halloween movie.
I think that ultimately we're going to do it as a Christmas movie too. Any opportunity to talk about The Addams Family is just my best day ever.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting that this movie, in just a few weeks of release, will also be celebrating an anniversary.
Yeah.
Which is part of the reason why I think we finally just said, fuck it, let's do it. Because The Addams Family was released on November 22nd, 1991 was when this movie was originally released. So we're doing it almost a month from its 30-year anniversary.
But that gives you the opportunity to make it a Nightmare Before Christmas-esque thing, which I know isn't really a Tim Burton movie. He's just a producer. But, you know, like you can have your Halloween and Christmas too. It's
worth bringing up Tim Burton because this movie was originally supposed to be a Tim Burton movie, and then he walked away from it. This was... I'm pretty sure this was my introduction to The Addams Family.
I think it was most people's introduction to The Addams Family because, like...
We weren't big New Yorker readers at the time.
Yeah, I mean, and think about the fact that the Addams Family TV show, I don't think it had nearly as much reach as the Munsters in later generations. Because, like, I knew about the Munsters before I knew about the Addams Family.
I think the Munsters was a slightly better show. Like, they both were bad, cheesy comedies.
Yeah.
I think the Munsters owned that it was a bad, cheesy comedy a lot more than the Addams Family did.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of those shows where you have Herman Munster tell a really shitty pun and then laugh his ass off for a minute. And it's like, you don't put that in a show because you think your joke is so good. You put that joke in your show because you're acknowledging that this character isn't as funny as he thinks.
Yeah. The fun thing about, you know, kind of contrasting the Munsters and the Addams Family is that the Munsters are monsters that want to be humans, and the Addams Family are humans that want to be monsters. You know,
yeah,
I mean, that's a very, brilliant, very, very simplistic.
But it works. It sums up the tone of those shows because the Munsters is such a wholesome show at its core. Yeah. Whereas, like, the Addams Family is still a wholesome show, but it is way more demented, fucked up, and horrifying in the Addams Family house than it is in the Munsters.
Yeah, because they're just
moment.
The 1950s, or I guess it would have been 60s when they were doing the Munsters. Clear family, and they're just trying to fit in. And the Addams Family are like, ugh, normalcy. But I think that's what's so fun about the Addams Family films is that they kind of distilled what was happening in the Chaz Addams comic strips and then really amplified it to extreme levels where, you know, we have Morticia cutting the tops of roses off, and you know, Wednesday being like an atheist, and there's so much going on there that I just love. It's just so fun.
It's a wild and like, but I think that I don't think in the 60s anybody was watching the Addams Family and being like, that's relationship goals, like that's like what I want out of life. But like the Addams Family in the movies, like Gomez and Morticia are fucking sexy.
Yeah. Have you seen that TikTok that's going around? That's like that woman who says, I didn't realize, but the Addams Family was supposed to be the inverse of the like 1950s marriage, where mom and dad or the husband and wife, whatever, don't care about each other, and instead they, you know, basically can't keep their hands off of each other. And I haven't known peace ever since, you know, like it's
yeah,
great.
Yeah, I mean, but there's that element of it. So like you're watching that, and there's so many people that like want that Morticia Gomez relationship.
But they got to put they got to put the Gomez work in if they want the Morticia.
Yeah, exactly. But I also think that it captures like I'm not one of those people. It's like I want to grow up to be Gomez Addams. You know what I mean? Like I think that's like a very like I think that's just a very like specific type of person. I don't fall into that. But what I will say, there's a moment in this movie where I have never related to Gomez Addams more in my entire life, which is when they are at the kids' variety show and they have to sit through all of these other kids' acts, and they just have a look like they want to kill themselves. Because now that I'm at that age where most of my friends have kids who are about 5 or 6, and I feel obligated to go to dance recitals, it is like torture to sit through like the 30 performances before my niece goes up there so I can just leave.
Yeah, that's American culture in a nutshell as well. But I don't think that we have any sort of redress for the way that talent shows are put together, because you know, we got to go through that. You know, it was like, okay, you watch my shitty friend's shitty talents, and then you get to watch my shitty talents, but you love me because I'm your son or whatever. And I don't know.
The dinosaurs really captured it beautifully with "I'm the baby, gotta love me." Like that's essentially every child in America for the first 20 years of their life.
You know, the fact that I just laughed at a dinosaurs reference on horror movie night is truly the horror of my life right now.
One of the things that I wanted to bring up about this, and I'm actually going to also kind of say, Scott, I'm shocked at you. But like the score to Addams Family, outside of just the ba-da-da-da, like the music, the opening credit scene, that score is fucking awesome.
Oh yeah, the music in this is fantastic. And I want to say that I think that I got something from the Addams Family, one of the Addams Family video games, and I put it in one of the old Console Crash releases. When I do those mashups, it's impossible for me to remember what everything is. So
I think I want a Console Crash album.
Yes, the answer is yeah. Okay, I'll do it. If somebody wants it, I'll do it.
I think that like what could be really interesting as you're like grasping at straws at this point for like, okay, what's the next theme gonna be?
Bro, do you think I'm grasping at straws? I'm not.
I know, you've got a laundry list. I would love, similarly to how our boys in Punchline did like songs from 1995 or 1994, like I almost want you to just start doing like the sounds of 1991, and you pick like 4 random movies that have dope ass scores that came out in 1991 and just like metalify them.
But that's not that different from what I would want to do anyway. And I will point something out, and I don't know if this is just that ghost of a memory in your brain, but the first Console Crash record, the only full length I've actually done as Console Crash, was originally going to be called 1991, because all of the games from it are from 1991. I only picked games and Nintendo games that were released in 1991.
I also wish that this was like, because I don't think this was Danny Elfman doing the score either. Like, I was like, man, if you could do like a Danny Elfman album or a Tim Burton album or something where it's like Beetlejuice and the ice dance from like...
I mean, I think that you're expecting too much from me, because
Danny Elfman's... you tried Beetlejuice and you were like, this is fucking insane.
Playing that, the arrangement that I was working on, I'll get there, but I have to gain skill, like it's Danny Elfman. It's funny, yesterday I was listening to the best of Oingo Boingo, and I've never actually listened to the best of Oingo Boingo, and
it's there even then.
It's there, but it's just a kernel of an idea of how talented he could be. And I'm not saying that he was held back by the rest of Oingo Boingo or what. It's just that there is something Herculean that changed inside of Danny Elfman when he started doing scores, and I don't know what it is.
Well, I think that you also have to look at it from the standpoint of, like, you look at what Oingo Boingo... So it was originally the Mystic Knights of Oingo Boingo, which is, like, the band, essentially, that we're getting in Forbidden Zone, where it's, like, very vaudeville, very over-the-top, very, like, in-your-face. Then the brother is like, I'm done doing music. I really want to focus on doing films. My brother Danny will take over the band. And it was like, in a matter of like 2 years, Danny was like, bring in the synths.
And it's cool to think about, like, that some of the sounds that they were, because I would consider them kind of second wave ska meets new wave.
Yeah, like, you remove those synths and replace them with horns, and they are like, Dead Man's Party could become a ska song very easily.
And I don't want to think that in the vastness of the internet that someone hasn't made
already.
Like a totally killer ska version of it. Because really, before I knew much about Oingo Boingo, the only song I knew was Dead Man's Party. And because it was everywhere at Halloween when I was growing up, and that's all I knew about Oingo Boingo. When you listen to it, I mean, when I listen to it now, I still think that it's basically a ska song. I think of them as a ska band. I mean, I think of them as a ska/new wave band, kind of post-punk almost.
Oingo Boingo is also one of those bands. Man, we'll get back to the Addams Family listeners in just a second.
We're doing a long-form Halloween episode today.
Yeah. I think Oingo Boingo is one of those bands where, like, you could very easily be like, yeah, they had that one song, Dead Man's Party. And then as you, like, dig into their, especially the songs that they did for movies, they had so many songs that you remember from movies. Like, obviously, Weird Science is, like, another big one. But for me, it's Goodbye, Goodbye at the end of Fast Times at Ridgemont High. I'm like, man, what a fucking jam of a song.
Yeah.
I think Danny Elfman having an orchestra at his behest, as opposed to just like a normal band ensemble, is not that different than like any time that Rivers Cuomo has been gifted an orchestra to work with.
I absolutely do not want you to put Rivers Cuomo in the same realm as Danny Elfman.
Exactly the same person. No, but like, that OK Humans album that came out this year was like getting this, like, this is the best thing they've recorded, full stop. And I think it's because Rivers had a like 30-piece orchestra to like get the full concept of what was in his head out, as opposed to being like, how do I do this giant idea with a drum, guitar, and bass?
True.
And I think that something similar happened with Danny Elfman, where it's like, oh, now I have 60-something instruments to like get every nook and cranny of what is inside my brain when I'm thinking about these songs. Like, once you told me how hard the Beetlejuice theme was becoming, I started to listen to it, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's like 10 moving pieces happening at any given moment in this song.
Okay, that's what I'm getting at, is that when you go from thinking about like rock and roll arrangements and composition to more classical arrangements and compositions, it's not just like, okay, I've got more moving parts that I can utilize. It's like a completely different way to, like, your brain works differently. And that's why I'm saying, like, I just don't understand where that was hiding when he was in Oingo Boingo, because I know for a fact that from my own musical maturation and journey, when I was untethered from doing things in a live situation, my brain started to work differently about melodies, counter melodies, like accompaniments, things like that, because there are rules that you have to follow for pop music, first of all, and second of all, to do anything live. So when I started doing Console Crash, I have always been a huge fan of Baroque style classical music because it made my brain tingle in a weird way, But learning how to write like that as a hobby, maybe that's the difference, is that music is a hobby for me, and it's recreation. Whereas for Danny Elfman, I feel like since he's been a musician his entire life, that his goals are different and his timelines are different. But I don't know. Maybe he just squirreled himself away for a year and was like, I'm going to learn how to do this thing. And then he popped up out of nowhere, and he was like, okay, I can do this thing. I think that he's kind of a virtuoso, though. I mean, like, I
Probably.
would never give myself that kind of credit, but I would definitely give Danny Elfman that credit.
So Addams Family, beautiful score. First joke that came up that still makes me laugh just as hard as when I was a kid is the fucking Uncle Knick-Knack bit. Gets me every fucking time. It's like Uncle Knick-Knack's spring wardrobe, Uncle Knick-Knack's winter wardrobe, Uncle Knick-Knack. Just like piling up the bags in the closet.
Yeah. I specifically, didn't take any notes this week because I was like, if I take notes, it's just going to be a quote fest, and nobody wants that. Like,
no,
quote fests are good for obscure
shit,
shit, but like for the Addams Family, everybody can just come on a podcast and quote Addams Family.
They do a really great job of just subtly through dialogue building up how fucking weird the entire like gene of being an Addams is.
Yeah.
One of my favorite examples of that is when they go into the vault and he's using the combo and he's like 2, 10, and he's like waiting for Fester to like answer, and he's like 7. He goes, no, old chap, 11. Eyes, fingers, toes. It's like such a great way to just put it out there that all of the Addams Family apparently
mutated.
has 11 toes.
And that's, it's also, to me, I always, well, not always, but as an adult, I always thought of that as like they're inbred.
Yeah.
Which is
probably
really dark. Like, the thing about the Addams Family that is so like this gossamer strand of genius, this amazingness, is that if you made a list of all the fucked up things that they are, it wouldn't be funny or amusing at all. It would be disturbing. But when you wrap it up in such a cheerfully dreary package, when I watch this movie, when I watch anything Addams Family, I just want more. And I'm like, well, what would be like this? What could I watch after this? And I have no idea because nothing is like this.
There's one scene that has always stuck out at me as a kid because it was really disturbing to me even as a kid, which it is the bloody duel scene in the variety show. Because I think like when I saw this for the first time, it was when it first came out on VHS. So I was 6 or 7 years old. And I don't think I totally grasped that it was special effects that they were supposed to be using.
Oh my God, Matt.
Well, no. I don't think that they actually maimed the kids. But at that point, I had bought into the Addams are so fucked up that like Wednesday and Pugsley are actively chopping off each other's limbs for the stage show.
Oh, you
and it wasn't
sweet
until
summer
like
child.
the next scene when they were perfectly fine and he had his arms, I was like, oh, okay, but I like didn't get what Fester had given them. So I was just like, what is happening? I don't like this.
So I'm a couple years older than you, and the first time I saw it, I honestly don't remember the first time I saw Addams Family because it's just so ubiquitous in my life. And I also don't understand how it could be ubiquitous in my life because I don't see my mom being like, yeah, we'll rent this. So much of my like horror stuff they're on TV or something like that I got my first taste of it. But for Addams Family, I know that I asked to rent this because I just had to have.
It's so weird because I was so afraid of horror, but I would watch all of this shit because like I was that kid who, I mean, we've talked about it on the show, but when I was like 4 or 5, the only things I watched besides cartoons was fucking Beetlejuice and Monster Squad over and over and over again.
It makes me think that there has to be something built into some people that we like horror.
So like now that I'm like hanging out with my friend Lauren's kids, right? And like Lauren, she's listening to the show, I know for a fact. She just watched Friday the 13th for the first time this year.
Lauren.
Because like Lauren.
Wow.
Because us talking about horror is finally getting her in her like late 30s to start to dip her toe into like stuff that is kind of gory and like she's very against it. But like she loves Halloween and like her little kids love picking up giant skull heads and putting them on. Like they love the Halloween stuff.
I was just thinking about like, what is it? What is it that some of us are just instinctively drawn to the dark and spooky? And I don't have an answer. It's just one of those I don't know.
There was something that was said this week on Colors in the Dark. Elric was saying how he has a distinct memory of going on the Haunted Mansion ride for the very first time. And he's like, I was maybe 5 years old. And it's that opening scene where you're in the room and all the paintings are stretching. And then all of a sudden the lights cut out and there's a death rattle scream that you hear. And he's like, and it scared me, and then I couldn't stop laughing. And he's like, and I think that was the first time that like my brain was like, it is fun to be scared. Mm-hmm. So I think it's like little stuff like that where it's like, for me, what was my aversion to horror was a fear of fear.
Yeah, I get it.
Once you get past the like, oh no, this is fun. Like going on a haunted ride is fun.
You know, like why is it fun? It's not fun to everybody. It's just it's a personality trait.
It's not. It is a personality trait. I think for me, the way that I've explained it to people anyway is like I'm one of those people that wants to see the good in the world, obviously, but also is overwhelmed by the reality that like people can be shitty and like the world can suck and like awful things can happen all the time. And I think that horror, I think it's why I also don't like nihilistic horror that much. I think horror is such an escape of like it's almost like you're throwing yourself in the deep end of the pool and finding out that it's going to be okay. You know what I mean? Like that's why you kind of root for the final girl, because you want to put yourself in the shoes of a person where it's like, even something this horrific, I could survive it. Yeah. And I could like move forward.
That's what you say in therapy about anxiety and panic attacks is like, yeah, I'm batting 1,000. I've survived every single panic attack of my life.
Exactly. All right. I am very proud of this note that I wrote down. I wrote, I love everything about the ball scene.
Yes.
It is the cantina and Jabba's palace of the Addams Family franchise.
Yeah, dude.
Like,
yes.
You just walk into this and it is just like, everything is insane for like 15 minutes and it's so fun.
But everybody thinks it's normal.
Yeah, there's all these weird practical creatures all over the place, and like you've got like a two-headed woman and you've got Cousin It, and I also love how much the world just accepts Thing. Like when Thing gets a job delivering mail in an office and like it seems like people are not running away from the hand as much as they're running away from this fast-moving truck of mail that's cutting through the hall.
Yeah. Your favorite character, Diggit Addams, is...
Yeah, Diggit Addams. Oh, I have Diggit Addams written down. Diggit Addams is here. But then also you just have, like, the mamushka. Like, that is going to... I will always think of the mamushka.
Yeah.
You got to dance the mamushka. I think at one point I asked Brian if we could figure out a way to do the mamushka
at his wedding. Yeah.
Throwing swords around. I was like, Brian, come on. I believe that if I tossed a sword in the air, you could catch it in your teeth perfectly.
I feel like Brian's aversion to doing the mamushka has nothing to do with the swords and everything to do with being the center of attention more than he already has to be for his fucking wedding.
That is, that was his least favorite part about the wedding was having to be in front of everybody.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I'm not making fun of him. I'm saying
no, it's the reality. Yeah. I mean, I probably
my wedding, I was
be like, look at me.
No,
push the bride aside in every photo.
It's the St. Lawrence show, bitches, and you for the rest of your life. I want to say.
Let me ask you. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say. So Megan and I are finally doing Morticia and Gomez this year as our costumes. I was like, okay, well, as Gomez, I have to do the pinstripe suit because no one will know who you are if you're dressed up in the smoking jacket from the ball scene. But man, it was a hard sell in my own mind and heart to not go with and have the swords. Like it would have been, maybe
so good.
Maybe I just do a cosplay of that for myself someday. Who knows?
I to this day, even rewatching this movie, I mean, whatever, I'll buy into it. The twist of this movie has always been a hard pill to swallow for me. That like it actually is Fester this whole time, but like
he's got amnesia.
The lie, like I'm just like this is just so. Because I'm also thinking like if you were the woman, I forget her name now, but the woman who found Fester, if you were her and you knew that this was how you discovered Fester. Like you found this guy in the Bermuda Triangle with no memory who looks like a hulking monster. And they're like, hey, this family of human monsters are trying to find their long lost brother, who's a hulking monster who got lost in the Bermuda Triangle, and he happens to look exactly like your son, you don't think that part of you would be like, it might be dangerous for me to send him in here because
She
it
doesn't
might
care.
bring
She's
back
got to get
something.
that green, man.
She's got to get that green, well, technically gold coin, but yeah.
As soon as I said it, I was like, it would roll off the tongue much better to say green, but I know that it's gold coins. It's doubloons, man.
Doubloons.
Doubloons.
But yeah, it's
well,
doubloons.
You know what? It's not your birthday anymore. I can make fun of the way you pronounce things again.
Go for it. And then, but whatever. We get past it. It's Halloween.
But here's the thing is, before we get past that, you need to get past it because it's hilarious. It's the absurdity
it's hysterical.
of it.
But as a kid, like literally as a kid, that was so outlandish to me that I'm like, oh, like lightning struck him and now he just really believes he's faster. Like I still
Lightning struck him,
was like,
and he actually is now electrified. He's shocked.
yeah, like I'm like this like imposter just like bought his lie too deep. Like,
that's another thing
but
that is in the lexicon and actually from this film. Man,
actually, this film gave me, I pronounced bravo, brava, because that's what it sounds like he's yelling when he's clapping in the
I'm pretty sure
auditorium.
he is clapping and saying brava. So what's so funny to me is that he'll be like cara mia, which is Italian. I don't think of the Addamses as Italian. I think of them as like Eastern European or something.
Yeah,
but not Italian.
if there were anything,
I don't know.
it would be
like
that.
It's all,
yeah,
like Hungarian or I don't know. They're the old country kind of. That's the whole joke and mythos in my mind is like they are, like the whole clan is from the old world and they're all monstrous. And it's just, it's so great. It's just, I love it so much. But if you could never rectify it actually being Fester, I can never rectify them actually being Italian.
Yeah, there you go. But then the movie ends with the sweet, sweet sounds of MC Hammer's Addams Groove.
Not a fan.
They do what they want to do, say what they want to say, live how they want to live, play how they want to play.
Yeah.
Just really sums up the Addams Family beautifully.
And I got to tell you, a little side note about this movie is that the time before me watching it for the show, for this episode, was a couple years back, right after my nephew was born. He had just come home from the hospital and his mom and dad needed to sleep. And so Megan and I went over and we rocked him in the, like the baby rocking chair. And the first movie that maybe not the exact first, but the first movie that he experienced with Megan and I was The Addams Family. And if that boy does not turn out to be spooky as fuck, in spite of his parents, I am going to I just have to give in my uncle card because I want to be like your Uncle Craig, right?
Yeah. No, and I'm trying very hard to be that guy to every one of my friends' kids.
Yeah,
like, you can be a little weird and spooky. It's totally okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, double feature. I feel like you are more of the Addams historian than me. So, I'm going to gift you the first double feature pick.
But this is going back to what I was saying earlier on in the episode is like finding something that stylistically, like tonally fits with the Addams Family is so hard. And I'm going to go with something that I would and probably have watched back to back in the past with Addams Family. Although I don't necessarily think it's the best double feature. It's just the first thing that comes to mind for me because it's like a natural fit because of the tone. Because I think that they are both spooky. There's a little, there's a lot more gore in the second one. They are, gothy, and they star Christina Ricci. I'm gonna go with Sleepy Hollow.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna continue on the Christina Ricci train, but keep it as a kids appropriate movie, and go right into watching Casper after this.
That makes sense for our personalities perfectly.
Yeah, very much so. All right, what's something that you watched, saw, listened to that you want to talk about?
All right, let me get my list because I do have a lot. So again, with the trying to stay positive thing, I have a question for you that is not a rhetorical. This is a legit question before I get into specifically what I watched. I feel like you have more experience with this than I do. Have you watched something that someone has made and you respect the person for making the product, but you realize that it has nothing for you in it?
Scott, there's been multiple interviews on this feed
I guess I'm not talking about it just an interview. I'm talking about like someone that you know in real life.
Oh, I know, but like there are people that like I have respected and actually walked away from the interviews liking quite a bit while still thinking that their movie's trash, but like my job was to do a good job promoting the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I definitely I've lucked out for the most part with, I would say 95% of the time when I watch a movie that my friend has made, I am pretty satisfied with it. And I feel like they usually know when I don't like the movie that much because I won't message them and say too much about it. I'll just be like, hey, good job. Like, like I'll keep it like simple.
Well, I guess that might be a personality difference between the two of us because I don't think I'm as effusive as you are. And I also keep a lower profile on social. I feel like you have more spoons to give than I do.
I have more spoons to give, and
that is concerned.
There's a lot that goes into thinking about what I post.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm not trying to say that you shit post. I'm saying that.
Oh no. I mean, like when I post something, every word is meticulously thought about because I'm like, I want to make sure that whatever I post is almost unable to turn into a flame war somewhere in the comments.
Yeah.
I think that people could see my posts and think that I am a very uninformed, middle of the road person, but it's more just like I don't want to deal with comments, so I'd rather say nothing.
Yeah. You want to say your piece. And then you don't want to have to argue or belabor the point.
Exactly.
I want to talk about a movie that I could not believe how much I enjoyed. And I feel like you won't roll your eyes, but maybe some listeners might roll their eyes because either they didn't like it or because they're like, how the fuck has Scott not seen this before? But I finally found Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter was streaming on HBO Max, and I'm like, well, I've got nothing to lose. I'll just put it on as I'm working one day. And I put it on, and 10 minutes in, I'm like, I turned it off because I was like, I can't just half-ass watch this. It was everything I like about movies. It's so over the top, and it's got costumes. It's historically completely inaccurate, and it's got monsters. It's fantastic. It also has the guy that plays young Howard Stark in Agent Carter, and it's got the guy who plays Sam Wilson, the Falcon. So I would say that Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter is MCU adjacent.
There you go. Perfect. I think I've seen it, but I really genuinely don't remember. I know I had the book for a while.
I would totally read that book because the screenplay was written by the guy who wrote the book. So another Tim Burton producer credit. I mean, it's weird how much he's coming up because on this episode because he's a terrible person. But Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter is way better than it should be.
I was just talking to someone about this yesterday. I was hanging out with my friend Rachel. Tim Burton might be like the definition of a absolute terrible person who also is like undeniably a talented visionary.
Yeah. It sucks. I feel like such a goddamn hypocrite with him because as far as music goes, I have always been like, you can't separate the artist from the art. Like I won't listen to Pantera because Phil Anselmo and Dimebag Darrell were fucking racists. Then I'm like, I love Sleepy Hollow. It's one of my top 5 favorite horror movies of all time.
This is what I've landed on, and this is how I justify it. Whatever that person did, however fucked up or awful they are, they have no ownership of the nostalgia that their work has already left on you. So it's like, yeah. So it's like when I find out that someone's shitty, I can say, all right, well, I'm drawing a line in the sand and I'm not supporting any of their other work. But also, like, if I'm going to deny myself, like, if I deny myself watching Beetlejuice, which was such a comfort to me as a 5-year-old kid because of how much of a piece of shit Tim Burton is, I'm almost giving Tim Burton more power
over
than just being like, fuck it. This is important to me, and I'm going to continue to love this even if I think you're a piece of shit.
Are we financially supporting them or just like culturally supporting them? And I am not the person to make that decision.
It's a tough judgment call, but
yeah. But anyway, so what did you watch? Like, I know I steamrolled.
That's all right. No, it's fine. I'll keep it short. Brian yelled at me when I texted him about this the other day, but I finally watched The Mitchells versus the Machines And I texted him and was like, hey, have you ever seen this? And he's like, I fucking told you and Scott to watch that movie almost a year ago.
Well, I don't even know what that is. Is it a kids movie or something?
It's a kids movie, but it's from the people who did Into the Spider-Verse.
Oh.
So it's done exactly like Into the Spider-Verse. Scott, tell me how much this sounds like the perfect movie for Matt Kelly. The protagonist of the movie is a teenage girl who dreams of making horror movies. She is not popular at school because she spends all of her time with her little brother shooting these weird little movies with their toys and family dog. And she's about to go away to film college, and she can't wait to go there because she's got an overwhelmingly supportive mom and a father who doesn't understand her pursuits of the arts.
Oh my God.
The dad, in an effort to like try to bond with them, takes them on a family road trip. He's like, instead of you flying to your new college, we're going to drive you to the college. And while they're on the road trip, a very Mark Zucker / Jeff Bezos type person launches a new type of AI that immediately becomes sentient and captures all of civilization except for this family that is on a road trip. But it is so funny. It's so charming. The only other thing I wanted to mention, because it is spooky season, the newest season of The Movies That Made Us dropped. Mm-hmm. It's got a very heavy horror focus. It's worth watching, but if you're like me and you've watched every fucking horror documentary that's ever been released about your favorite movies, you're not going to break any new ground of information. There's not going to be a like, wow, I didn't know that Halloween was going to be called The Babysitter Murders. But if you're not like me and you haven't watched like Going to Pieces, The Rise and Fall of Slasher Films, Nightmares in Red, White, and Blue, you know, Crystal Lake Memories, Never Sleep Again, etc. It is really cool that Netflix legitimately put out mini documentaries on like the making of Friday the 13th, the making of Halloween, the making of Nightmare on Elm Street, and the making of Alien. Coming to America's in there for some reason. But yeah, I mean, it's worth watching a few of them if you've never seen those types of docs. But really, the big, like Mitchell's versus the Machines, I will be hard pressed to think of a movie as we're down to the last 2 months of the year that will top it for my favorite film. Because like most of this year, I've been like, nothing's really wowed me this year. Like, been like my absolute favorite. But that I was like, I will be watching this very regularly.
So, you know, you mentioned, since we're already this far, I'm going to mention 3 more horror movies that were, I believe that they're 2021 horror movies. It's always weird to look on IMDb and see like a 2021 release, but you look on Wikipedia and it says it's a 2020 movie. I think that it has to do with releases in home countries versus worldwide, things like that. But I watched
festivals.
Yeah, I think that you're right. It's festivals where they have them as quote unquote release dates. But I'm going to consider all 3 of these as 2021 movies, and I watched them all this last week. I'm not going to really say a whole lot except for the fact that none of them really wowed me. I'm going to go in order of least to best watch, but In the Earth is streaming on Hulu, I want to say, and it's one of those movies where nothing happens. And when I was watching it, I was waiting for something to happen, and I was like, come on, like, you're gonna give me the big denouement? You're gonna, like, is it gonna be a payoff? There's no payoff in it. It's one of those movies that has a cool concept and has really good sound work, but that doesn't make a good movie, and the pacing sucked. So I would not recommend you watch that necessarily, but this is kind of like setting up for the fact that you're not wrong, that 2021 is a pretty lean year for movies in general, but specifically horror. I watched Censor, which is a British film. It's a period piece from, it's supposed to be like the video nasty, so early 80s in England. Do you know about that?
Censor has actually been sitting on my like Netflix DVD list, but if that's streaming somewhere, I will remove it and go watch it streaming.
Yeah, I think that was Hulu. I think that if you look at it as a historical fiction, it's fun, but it's not the worst thing I've watched this year, let me tell you. But I just didn't love it, and I was expecting more from it. And then the best of the 3 is called Meander. Have you heard about it? It's like a sci-fi horror movie.
No.
So it's kind of like Cube meets Jacob's Ladder.
Okay.
But it's a French film, and it has 3 actors in it. It's this woman who wakes up in this maze, It's like a maze of very skinny tunnels, and she has like a thing on her wrist that it's a timer that gives her X amount of minutes to get to basically a safe spot, or else she's going to get incinerated or burnt in acid or blah, blah, blah. It's very claustrophobic, so it made me feel things, and that's what I appreciate about it. But I don't think it even knew what it was trying to say, and it's very heavy-handed. It's like very moralistic, and it's trying to say something, but I just don't think it says anything. But I appreciate that it made me feel tense, and there is a scene that kind of got me a little choked up because this past week I was really missing our dog Petey that passed away a year and a half ago. You know, I think it might have been kind of a confluence of things, but they're just 2021 may redeem itself with Halloween Kills, Lamb, Antlers, you know, stuff that's coming out at the tail end, this last 2 months of the year, you know, maybe.
It's a lot of that stuff. It's been such a weird year because I think so much stuff just got held up because they were like, is it safe to open the theaters? Is it not safe? And like, you had these small films that they didn't give a shit about. So they just be like, fuck it, just throw it on streaming. But then there was stuff like Halloween Kills where they're like, no, like we really want to wait until like people feel at least a little comfortable going into a movie theater to watch this. All right. Sorry that last week's episode, I'm sure you caught a little bit of it. I had some really fucking awful mic issues. So you got a really short Halloween 6 episode. We've made it up for you with this episode of Addams Family. You're welcome. Don't bitch about us about episode lengths anymore. But we'll be back next week with even more horror movie night fun.
Happy Halloween.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network. You're listening to the Geekscape Network.